Welcome to Stories Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Weldin. Today's story is called Tikvah and the Oil, a Hanukkah story, written for you by Andy Rosen. Thanks! Enjoy the episode! Tikvah and the Oil. But I don't want to leave again, Tikvah said. The lights are so beautiful. I can't bear to miss them, and we only just returned. This is no time to stop and rest. Our work is not done, her mother answered. They stood on the great plaza and gazed into the temple. Warm light from its oil lamps spilled out into the streets of Jerusalem, where soldiers from the triumphant Maccabee army remained stationed on most corners. We only have enough oil to fuel these lamps until tomorrow, Tikvah's mother said. While your father and I stay here to rebuild, I need you to visit a woman who lives just outside of town. They say she keeps olive oil to make medicines, but she may have enough to help us. It's only a half-day's walk. Tikvah sighed in reluctant agreement. Her father was a powerful rabbi. His family would be expected to help in the rededication of the temple, which the Jews had reclaimed from Greek imperial soldiers just hours before. As her friends and neighbors celebrated in the plaza through the night, Tikvah put her head on her mother's shoulder and dozed off in the glow of lights. She woke up as the sun shot its first rays across the horizon, fastened her sandals, and began to march down a road leading away from the temple and out of town. Tikvah wandered for hours, watching the tightly packed stone structures of central Jerusalem give way to quiet, hilly pastures, seemingly untouched by the chaos in the heart of town. She came to a tidy hut with smoke thinly curling from its chimney. A gnarled, ancient olive tree stood out front with one word carved into its trunk. Tinctures. This was the place. Tikvah knocked on the door. Hello? Hello, dearie, a cheerful voice rang out. The door flung open and a gleeful woman with curly red hair bounced out to the stoop. How can I help you today? Bunion cream? Wart paste? Oh, you're too young for bunions. Pimple potion? First one's on me. And yes, I'm Gila. Who are you exactly? Hi. I'm Tikvah, and actually I'm not looking for any of that today. This might sound silly, but do you use oil to make your tinctures? Oh, why, of course, dearie, only the finest. This ancient olive tree produces the softest, most supple olive oil. It doesn't make much, but it delivers enough for me year after year. Well, I was wondering, could you spare a few jars? You see, I just came from the temple in Jerusalem. Oh, yes, I'm aware of the temple, dearie. And the thing is, the Greeks have left, but we only have one jar of oil, and we don't think it's enough to keep the sacred flame going for more than a few hours. Gila stood on the stoop and thought for an uncomfortably long time. Oh, well, you see, dearie, she said after what seemed like an hour, I don't understand all this fuss about the temple. We've been doing fine out here, and it seems like it's not worth all of the fighting. I'm not sure I can spare any oil for that. Tikvah hadn't considered that she'd have to explain the importance of the temple and its rituals. In Jerusalem, she and her family had prayed every day in hopes that the Jews could return to their holiest place and worship there as they had done for generations. But when she tried to explain all this to Gila, nothing came out. All she could say was, Okay, thanks, and sorry for bothering you with this. Oh, it's no bother, dearie. And please come back when you're ready for that pimple potion. Tikvah cringed. Maybe I will. On the way back, Tikvah could only look at the ground. People had fought and died to liberate the temple, and she couldn't even rustle up a measly jar of oil. When Tikvah got back into town, it was starting to get dark. She couldn't bear to look up and see the temple in darkness. But when she finally summoned the will to scan the Jerusalem skyline, she was puzzled to see the lamps still burning, just as they had been when she left. I'm not sure what happened, Tikva's father told her when he spotted her climbing the stairs to the plaza. The priest said the oil would only last for a few hours, a day, tops. But it's still going. Exhausted, Tikvah went home and collapsed into bed. As the dawn light crept into Tikva's window, her mother shook her awake. The lamps burned all night. They're calling this a miracle. But a few extra hours, I think it's just good luck, which will be running out any moment now. Anyway, I think I know where you might be able to find some oil today. Tikva's feet hurt from walking for hours the day before. She pulled her blanket up and turned away from her mother. Can't someone else go this time? I'm just a kid. It's not very far, and it shouldn't take you long, her mother said. There's a man nearby who uses olive oil to make soap. Our neighbors say he's been hoarding for years. I'm sure he can spare at least a little if you ask him nicely. Okay, Tikvah said. I'll go after I sleep just a bit more. Oh, you'll go now, her mother said. Our work is not done. Tikvah's mother was right about the distance to the soapmaker's house, but she had not mentioned that he lived at the top of the steepest, rockiest hill in Jerusalem. As she climbed, Tikvah watched loose cobblestones roll out of place and down the slope toward home. There was no house at the top, only a large, flat stone that partially covered a staircase leading into a dark hollow that had been cut into the hillside. There was nothing about this that looked welcoming, friendly, or promising, but Tikvah winced and pressed onward. She descended the stairs, at first taking only shallow breaths. She hated the smell of mildew and must. But she soon remembered. They made soap here. It might be dark, but at least it would be clean. She flared her nostrils and took a deep sniff of lemon, incense, and something floral. She came to a dimly lit room where a few men and women sat lounged on threadbare cushions. One man, wearing a burnished metal chestplate and a Greek military sash, was talking to a woman whose long hair spilled out over a deep green shawl. "We're retreating to Aleppo this week," the soldier told the woman. "This soap can fetch twice the price there. I plan to carry as much as I can to the market at home, and if I have any left, my daughters and sisters—" The man's rambling trailed off as he noticed Tikvah. "Long journey today? Your face is covered with dust from the road. I hope there will still be some soap left for you when I'm done shopping." "Oh, I'm not here for soap," Tikvah said. "Well, then what are you doing here?" "I came to talk to the owner. I'm trying to find some spare oil for the temple. Do you know where he is?" "Oh, yes. You Hebrews and your temple with those lanterns. I'll never understand why they sent me here to fight over that. What's the point?" "The owner is Haim," the soldier said coldly. "He went to get more rose and jasmine from his garden plot. He claims that he'll be back before the sun goes down." "Before the sun goes down? But it's barely noon, and I have to get back before the—" "Haim works on his own schedule, girl. Sit and wait, or leave. It makes no difference to me." Haim didn't return until hours later. And when he did, he wafted in on a thick cloud of fragrance. Good-smelling soap was nice, Tikvah thought, but at this distance the smell was burning her nostrils. "And who are you?" Haim cocked his head and looked at Tikvah. He had bright green eyes, a big hoop earring in one ear, and a beard that came to a point below his chin. "You've been waiting a long time?" "Well, yes. I just have one question, really. I understand you use olive oil to make your products. Could you spare just a few jars? You see, they've just relit the lamps at the temple and—" Yes, I am aware of the temple. Not enough oil. I'm sorry, I really am, but I can scarcely understand how that is my problem." "Well, aren't you Jewish? Haven't you been waiting for the temple to be restored, like I have?" "Yes, I'm Jewish, but I'll be honest, it wasn't so bad around here with the other guys in charge. The ceremonies at the temple to honor the Greek god of wine were as good as any bar mitzvah I've ever attended. And, Greeks buy soap too. Again, Tikvah was speechless. How could he not care? If that's all, girl, I think you should head home. It's getting late. As she trudged up the stairs, Tikvah thought of lots of things she wished she had said to him. If Hinds' ancestors had been as indifferent as he was, neither he nor Tikvah would be here today. Just this week, brave soldiers had fought to restore the temple. But he gets to stay out of it? She vowed to herself that if she got another chance, she'd get the oil. The sky was dark when she emerged atop the staircase. But again, she saw the temple's lanterns glowing in the distance. She'd been here all day. Surely the temple would have run out of oil by now. Maybe somebody else had brought some back. When Tikvah returned home, her father was staring out the window, puzzled. No one had been able to deliver oil for the lamps, but still, they burned. Tikvah was out the door the next morning as soon as the sunlight came in. On this third day, she figured she would do something simple. Ask her neighbors. Maybe together they could gather up enough to last a few extra days. But after a day of knocking on doors and calling up to old women on balconies, all she had was a small beeswax candle. Pretty, but it wasn't going to help. As she returned home, the sun fell, and Tikvah saw that the lamps still burned. On the fourth day, Tikvah's mother told her that a local shopkeeper had said he thought there was a jar of oil in the attic of his store. She dug through miscellaneous unsellable items until twilight. A purple and orange tunic, a bucket of hopelessly mismatched slippers, and a bag of flour that tore when she lifted it, leaving her covered in white powder. Nothing that looked like oil, though. Still, when she raised her head to look out at the temple, Tikvah saw again that the lamps remained lit. On the fifth day, Tikvah decided she'd try to make her own oil. She took a basket of olives that her mother had secured at the market and tried to figure out how to squeeze oil from these small, hard fruits that seemed to be mostly made up of pits. She scattered the olives across a flat stone and set a wide plank on top of them. Then she stepped on top, hoping to press hard enough to get anything, to help with the temple. Instead, the olives rolled beneath the plank and Tikvah's feet shot out from under her. She fell on her back as the olives rolled into the gutter. So much for that idea. That night, she looked up toward the temple, wondering how long this lucky oil would keep burning. For one more night, at least, it did. On the sixth day, Tikvah traveled to the northern edge of town, toward a spot where her parents told her an olive grove had once been. But when she arrived, all she found were dead trees. The invading army had hacked off most of their limbs to build fires for their camp. And still, on the sixth night, the temple fires continued to burn. On the seventh day, it was Shabbat, and Tikvah rested. And she prayed. And she wondered, if God wanted the Jews to keep the fires of the temple burning, why was it so hard to find the fuel they needed? If God wanted the Jews to worship in the temple, how was it that an enemy force had displaced them for so long? That was it. This was supposed to be hard. If it was easy, anyone could do it. Tikvah had been chosen to do this because it was hard. And as she struggled, the flame had stayed lit. She still had the chance to succeed. Her work was not done. Tikvah knew what she had to do. In the morning, Tikvah set out to visit Gila the tincture maker again. And by lunchtime, she was standing in front of the gnarled olive tree. She knew what she was going to say. Tikvah raised her fist to knock on the door just as it swung inward to reveal Gila's smiling face. "Well, hello, dearie. I take it you're not here for the pimple potion this time." No, ma'am." Tikvah worried that her words were failing her again. I've been thinking about your visit, and I had wondered whether you'd given up. Then last night I went to visit a friend who lives closer to town. I saw the temple over the horizon, and it was lit up just as it had been when I was a girl like you. A beautiful sight. I assumed you'd been successful in finding your oil, but when I arrived at my friend's house, she told me that 1 day's worth of oil you started with had burned for 7 so far, and it was still going this morning. "I know what you're going to say," Tikvah said forcefully. Why am I badgering you for oil when everyone says the temple has a miracle going on? Well, I'll tell you this. We don't know how long this miracle, if that's what it is going to last. And I'm not going to be the one to let the flames die. She was yelling now. This is my duty. After all the things all the people have done to get us to this point, you can't even spare a jar of oil from your creams and salves? Why don't you take your pimple potion and... Oh, dearie, you haven't let me finish. Gila ducked abruptly into the house and returned with a basket bearing 3 large jars of honey-colored oil. When I thought about how determined you'd been to keep the fire going, I wished I had given this to you right away. Tikvah smiled at Gila. But if I'd gotten this oil on the first day, we'd have never seen how God would provide for us as we struggled. Tikvah ran back to the temple, the jars clinking as she tried to hold them steady over the bumpy road. When she grew closer, she could see the flames were dimmer than they had been the evening before, and when she arrived it was clear that they were beginning to flicker in and out. "I have the oil!" she shouted at one of the men tending the flame, and he ran out to meet her. He retrieved the oil and emptied the jars into the lamp's reservoir, and suddenly the flames grew brighter than Tikvah had ever remembered seeing them. The glow extended for a good distance, far enough that they could see a line of riders returning toward the temple. It was a caravan, the lantern tender told her, bearing many drums of lamp oil. It would be enough, he said, to keep the flame burning for a long, long time. "You can rest now," the man said. Tikvah didn't hear. She noticed a stone was out of place along a nearby wall, and she was walking over to clean it up. Her work, she said to herself, was still not done. The end. Thanks for listening!